proved them wrong, and now they can see that her business is becoming so successful.
Naje gukora rero haza keya ndayigana ariko nyigana ari urusaku ariko ndakora ndizigama itwigisha kugana ibigo by'imari ngana muri sako. Imbogamizi rero tugira kugira ngo bakwake ingwate umugabo yumva ari gufiye ku bucuruzi bw'umugore biragoye, ariko narahendahenze arankundira ampa ingwate aza no kunsinyira, narakoze tuva mu icumbi ubu dufite inzu yacu y'amabati 102.
Yes, thank you, Florid. She's saying that from the businesses she ventured in, as she concluded, she said that they ended up owning their proper house, which is very decent. And when they were just doing the business, she had the constraint of having a collateral when she wanted to apply for to present a collateral to apply for a loan. So the husband was a bit reluctant, but she tried to convince the husband, and the husband ended up admitting her to use the collateral. He signed for her to the bank to get the loan, and now the business is so successful. Rakoze rero cyane Florid kudusangiza ubuhamya cyangwa se iyo nkuru nziza, ariko ndabona hari akantu kamwe yashaka kongeraho. She wants to add on something, maybe wakomeza ukongera ko kantu ushaka.
Icyo nongeraho nuko mu mbogamizi tugira hari ukuntu nyine iyo ugiye kwaka nk'inguzanyo muri banke uri umugore, hari igihe usanga bitagenda neza, rimwe na rimwe ntubone amafaranga wari ukeneye, ugasanga birakudindije. Ariko mu buryo nabashije gukoramo nyuma yo kubona iyo nzu, nyuma yaho naje gukomeza ntera imbere ngura rivani, ubaho ngeze kubera imbogamizi zo kurangura ubona kenshi nyine ku mugore bigoye. Ubu nashatse perime ndiga ndatsinda, nabonye perime ndashaka kujya njya kwirangurira.
Wow, so this is so interesting. She's saying that despite the challenges that they face doing businesses, she overcame them. She ended up even buying a refund motor that she uses for transporting commodities and the other items. And apart from buying that refund motor, she ended up even having a license, and now she cannot even hire people to ride that refund. She can do it by herself, which means that she's now okay without really spending money to hire other people to ride that refund motor. Urakoze cyane rero Floride, ubuhamya bwawe burashimishije cyane kwerekana uburyo imbogamizi mushobora guhura nazo mu gukora ubucuruzi n'izindi business, ariko mugahangana nazo kugeza ubwo business zanyu muzikoze kandi zikagenda neza. Urakoze cyane. Twagire kuri Chantal mu kanya gato dufite, nawe watubwiye ko ukora business yo gusiga amarangi. Ese hari imbogamizi uhuramo nazo zijyanye no kubona gukoresha serivisi z'imari ugana ibigo by'imari ukabona barakwakira neza, cyangwa se unatangira iyo business yawe, watubwira niba hari imbogamizi wahuye nazo ariko zishingiye ku kuba uri umudamu?
Murakoze cyane. Nge ndabanza nshimire Rwanda Women's Network yatekereje ku mugore, cyane cyane itekereza ku mugore wo mu cyaro. By'akarusho itangira kuri wa mugore uciriritse utagira n'ikintu na kimwe azi. Izi saha tuvugana natangiye ndi umugore utazi no kuguza inote y'igihumbi ku mugenzi we, kuko nabaga nzi ko nta wundi buyakure. Numvaga bigoye rero batwigisha ijambo ububasha. Numvaga ububasha bufitwe n'abantu bakomeye, abadepite, abaminisitiri, twebwe ntabwo dufite. Ariko iryo jambo na n'izi saha ritumye nicara muri Marriott.
This is so amazing. She's saying that before she didn't really have an understanding about doing businesses, but thanks to Rwanda Women's Network, so they educated them, they shared some financial literacy and business skills, and she ended up starting a business, and the business she started had enabled her now to be at Marriott attending such an event?
Natangiye rero maze kwiga ububasha mbona kuboha uduseke, kudoda, kugira ute, ni akazi gaciriritse, ni keza, ariko nashatse ese ko mfite imbaraga nakora iki gifatika. Ntabwo byari byoroshye kubwira umugabo ngo ndashaka kwiga ibintu by'ubufundi, kuko yambwiraga ati umugore igihe cyose watangiye gukora ku mafaranga arasuzugura, dore utangiye kudefiriza, agasuzuguro kari hafi aho, abagabo baraje bakubone, ubwo ugiye kujya urara mu mahoteli. Byari bigoye cyane, na n'ubu biracyagoye, ariko ibyo maze kugeraho, ibyo amaze kubona byatumye noneho ubu ngubu we ku giti cye afite impinduka.
Yes, she's saying that because before she was doing a business which is really ordinary, but she thought of scaling up, and when she scaled up the business, the husband started just commenting and saying that a woman who has got money, who has ventured into big businesses, she starts as bragging, and she started really developing some bad characters. But Chantal ended up convincing the husband that even a woman can venture into a big business and continue to be the woman or the wife that she used to be even before.
Maze gushyira mu bikorwa, byabaye ngombwa njya ku isoko ry'umurimo, maze kwiga gukora irange. Igihe cyose nasabaga akazi baravuga ngo ese ubundi mahirwe uriya mugore koko wakayombya, uriya yakora iki? Ibyo bitaka se aradusigira inzu, ubwo iryo ni irange. Byabaye ngombwa bansuzugura nk'umugore, ese barapatana uru rusengero ararukoraho iki? Izo mbogamizi rero zatumye kenshi bangiriye icyizere ntangiye gukora. Aho nkoze umwe agahunda ubuhamya, bituma noneho batangira kwizera ko nshoboye.
She has just said that she started the painting business, but unfortunately, some people had some understanding the gendered social norms, saying that how a woman can really do such a business of painting. They didn't have confidence into her. But after trying it, she did for some people, and those people, after seeing that she was doing it in a proper way, they ended up recommending her to other people, and now she's really successful, and she can get clients, despite the fact that at the beginning people were just commenting that a woman cannot do such a big business.
Za mbogamizi rero z'abagore ntizibura, igihe cyose baracyavuga ko turi abagore. Ejo bundi maze gufata igikombe, nagifatiye ahangaha, n'ubundi nahawe igikombe nka rwiyemezamirimo ariko nk'umugore ushoboye.
And she was saying that despite the challenges that they face, she recently got an award as a successful woman entrepreneur, and she's really happy for that. She said that she got that prize even here at Marriott Hotel, which is something great. Chantal rero ngira ngo twagushimira kuba dusangije ubwo buhamya, ndetse we na Floride muravuga ko nubwo hari imbogamizi abagore bahura nazo zituma badakora business, ariko nta gucika intege kurimo, mukomeza mugasunika kugeza ubwo mubigezeho, byanaba ikintu cyiza rero mwazanasangiza n'abandi. But I see that she wants to add on something. Wakongeraho rero ikintu ushaka kongeraho?
Icyo nongeraho, izo mbogamizi nabashije kuvugana na Vice Mayor, ndamubwira rwose njyewe ntabwo ngishaka gukora amarange nyakorera mu madobo n'iki, nshaka gukora uruganda, nanjye nkagira uruganda, nk'abaranguzi bakajya bandangurira. Ariko imbogamizi ya mbere, manza uzana ingwate, kandi ingwate urabyumva, ndi wa mugore utaragira ya ngwate kucyo nakwaka miliyoni 5. Icyo ngicyo rero cy'imbogamizi ku ngwate, byo abagore turacyagifite cyane. Turacyafite n'imbogamizi yo kumva ko umugore batapfa kumuha inguzanyo kuko nta ngwate iremera afite. Amatsinda tuyakoramo, dufite gukorana na BRAC, dukorana n'urwego, ariko niba tubasha kwishyura ya mafaranga buri cyumweru angana kuriya, ndumva baduhaye inguzanyo iri hejuru, udashoye ntiyunguka. Murakoze.
Yes, urakoze cyane Chantal. She just concluded highlighting the challenge or the constraint they are facing, which has to do with having a collateral, because she wanted just to scale up her business. But the issue she's facing has to do with having a collateral so that she can even apply for a loan of 5 million Rwandan franc. But due to that constraint, they really see it as something which is hampering the growth of their businesses, and she was just highlighting that as a big challenge. Twabashimira rero ku kanya muduhaye mukamudusangije uburyo nk'abadamu batuye mu bice bitandukanye, haba mu cyaro ndetse no mu mujyi, muhangana n'ibyo bibazo byose, kandi twizeye ko nimukomeza nk'uko mwatangiye n'ubundi bizagenda neza. Murakoze cyane.
Namwe murakoze.
Please give another round of applause. Entrepreneurship is not for the faint-hearted, and it certainly isn't when you have so much stacked against you or seemingly against you. And I think we can all agree that some of the biggest challenges in general for any human being is social norms. And therefore, finally, for what we all came here for, which is this study, hearing the key findings of the study commissioned by AFR, led by Market Watch, and supported by so many of the partners and stakeholders here. That is also the first of its kind in Rwanda. So that's also quite groundbreaking, really understanding, not just the financial actors on the supply side or, in general, but really on the demand side. What are women entrepreneurs facing? What are their challenges, but also their opportunities? And so without further ado, I am very pleased to call up to the stage Emily, who has led this fantastic study on gendered social norms diagnostic and their impact on women's financial inclusion in Rwanda. Thank you, Emily. And would you like this mic? Fantastic. Please give her a big round of applause. We look forward to the study presentations.
Thank you very much. You can. So my name is Emily. I'm sure most of you saw my email, so you can put the face to the name. Yeah. And one time my lecturer told me that when you are at the center, the pressure is on you. And so you take a breather. Yeah, but I'm just buying time so that they put up that. Okay. So I want to appreciate the consultants that did this study. Mine was just coordinating and with my teammates. And so we have Niha, please, from Market Share. So with Niha was representing Market Share that was commissioned to do this study. And it just so happened that when you are doing the dissemination, she happens to be in Kigali. And so she's joined us with the rest of the Market Share team. So thank you very much. I'm just going to echo what Iyachu had said from the beginning. Mine is a briefed version of the report. And so maybe some of the contents I might not really speak about them, but they are clearly in if you can scan the chart that is in front of you, and you get either the abbreviated version or the full version. The full version has good narrations that you can actually understand especially to echo what Chantal and the other lady was speaking about. Okay. So one of the objectives that we as AFR sought to actually achieve was the fact that we understood that social norm, there must be something behind the constraints. Why are just the constraints that are influencing women and women entrepreneurs particularly to access, use, and benefit from the financial services. And so we wanted to have this study was basically to provide a country level insight, not only for AFR, but for all of us as Rwanda, to have just how to understand what are these social norms and how do they impact on the women entrepreneurs in terms of them accessing, using, and benefiting from the financial services. And of course, with this, we wanted to generate insights that can also influence AFR and AFR as a market influencer in terms of how do we design our programming that will actually now influence the market system. And so the social norm is not your kind of, the normal research that we do, because it's more exploration. The social norms is more about understanding why people are behaving the way they are behaving and what is actually leading them, what is influencing, what are these other factors that are actually influencing how they are behaving the way they are. And so we realized that you can't just do it the normal way some other researches are done. And so we had 3 phases into this. So the first phase was to design. You have to understand what is it that you want to achieve at the end of the day. And given that it is a financial inclusion for women, and so we wanted to understand what will be the financial outcome we wanted to understand. So how do we set those objectives? How do we define even the scope of the area? And that required a collaboration of different stakeholders, not just as AFR, but if you want to influence the rest of the ecosystem, then we needed other stakeholders to be on board. And the second level was to go now into the behavior exploration. This because as our moderator has said, this study was basically for the demand side. We wanted to understand why women entrepreneurs are behaving in the manner that they're behaving, that actually now constrain them to access and use the financial services. And so we did a quantitative survey. Our sample was 615, but where we got these respondents, we had to work with the financial service providers, get the women entrepreneurs that are already banked with them. And then from what we explored from the information they gave us, we actually now went into deep diving to understand deeper, in depth on these particular norms. And so for the women entrepreneurs, we wanted to understand what are the prevailing factors that are within them, from their household to even how they interact with the financial service providers. And so out of that, the three methods I've explained, we came up with one financial inclusion outcome, which was women entrepreneurs in Rwanda increase their access, use, and benefit from financial services and products. And with that, for us to explore on that particular financial inclusion outcome, we had to have change objectives. So what are these change objectives that will lead to that particular financial inclusion outcome? So the first change objective was to understand the access, that women entrepreneurs access the financial services and products to grow their businesses. And the second one was on the use, that women entrepreneurs use the available financial products and services to grow their business. And the third one, which is more of at the end of this, we want them to have control of their income in terms of participating in decision making, have a decision making power to manage their businesses. And so the target group, we may wonder, the research was not done in the whole of Rwanda, but as you heard from the two ladies who were giving their testimonies, we did not do the research in Bugesera, neither did you do it in Rwamagana district. But you can see clearly that they are actually echoing what is the experiences of the women in Rubavu, in Nyagatare and Burera districts. And why we picked these three districts, we wanted to represent a town, an urban behavior and a rural behavior, both from cross-border trade. So Burera and Nyagatare are rural, and Rubavu represents our urban. And of course, we wanted to look at women. Most often we classify women as one segment, and yet women are not, we are not monolith. We are different. So the woman in Nyagatare, definitely an entrepreneur in Nyagatare will be different from one in Rubavu. And so we wanted to understand even the age bracket, there is, in profiling norms, have greater impact on different demographics. And so that's why we looked at 16 to 30, we categorize them as the young women. You'll see that throughout the report. And also 31 to 35, we classified them as adult women. And of course, from the sample, we picked from single and married. And so we are going to see how that particular demography really plays out in terms of social norms. So just want to appreciate the stakeholders. This was not done just by us alone. We had to partner with different stakeholders. From the government institutions, we had MIJEPROF, the GMO, and BNR and MINALOC through the district mayors. And I think we have the deputy mayor from Nyagatare, Madam Juliet, is here. And because the study was aligned to their mandates at the district level. And also financial service providers, these were very key for them to provide us with the database so that we are able to identify, to sample from there. And so we had Urwego Bank, Vision Fund, and RIM, as well as we also thought that these ones are banked, but there are those informal those who access finances through the informal setups, like the village savings and loans associations that was provided through CARE, and of course the civil society that like Rwanda Women Network is here, RWAMREC is here. New Door also provided for us women with disability, also engaging in business. And so I'll just get to the behavioral types of behavioral drivers. It's very important to understand these types of behavioral drivers so that you understand what are these drivers, where are they originating from. So the internal drivers is basically, they refer to the specific to an individual. Now, what is your aspirations? What are your beliefs? What do you believe in? What are your skills and agencies? So that also impact what you believe, what you've been oriented to do, so as an individual. And then there is a structural that is beyond the individual, but these ones are levels within the market. The levels of barriers such as availability, whether they are accessibility, and also affordability of financial products and services. And then we can also have the collective. Collective means they can, you might find an internal and structural forces working against that particular woman and actually now exerting more constraints. And so from the quantitative survey, the 615 respondents, we had to classify what are these constraints, what are the kind of behavior that they were actually now, what are the kind of behaviors that were constraining them, one, to access, constraining them to use, and also to control their income. So I'll just wrap up, but you can get it from there. So the first one was the women entrepreneurs. Of course, they prefer to use digital financial services. And they have phones, but they do not, many of them do not have access to internet. So we found that this was a structural and internal driver at the same time. So we find that 80% of the respondents own a mobile phone, but out of that, 21% have internet access. Only 21% out of 86% that have mobile phones. So that simply tells you that you could have a phone, but if there was a product in the market that you have to access through digital platform, then the women are not able to because of that internet connectivity. And I'm glad, I hope the MNOs are around. Of course, the urban access was also, there was a factor between the urban and the rural. The inaccessibility is more in the rural than in the urban. The other constraint that, on access was the women entrepreneurs intend to grow their businesses, but they do not qualify for credit that can help them grow their business. This was found to be structural. It's not within them, but it's because, first of all, we found out that 50% of the respondents that had not yet taken a loan were either preparing, which means they were intending, or in the process. But then 75% of them were unable to provide collateral. And 12% were single urban young women. They indicated that they don't have information on loan processing as a constraint. I found this, the way we always say in the urban, we have everything, we know everything. But imagine we have 12% of the women, the young urban women that have no information on those who are providing loans. They don't have that information. And majority struggle to meet the bank collateral. 58% of them said they were unable to meet that. So we look that in details when you're talking about the actual. So this was because some of them, you find that when the women want to, because of the collateral is required, they have to get permission from the owners of the assets. Most of the assets are registered in either the male or the household. And if they are shared, our regulation here, you have to get a consent from the husband. And Chantala just told us how she had to eventually, I listened to the tone when she said eventually. So which means there was a long process before that eventually. So those are the constraints that the women were talking about. In terms of another, one of the women said, a young single woman from Rubavu said that her family would be willing to support her, but that will depend on the amount she's asking for. So we found that even the amount you are asking for them to give you the permission to use a collateral, it depends with the amount. So it must be amount that is not risky enough to lose that will cause you to lose the family asset in case the woman entrepreneurs defaults. And of course, that if the amount is small, so that probably explains why the women entrepreneurs, we are always in micro businesses, because that is the amount that much that you can access. In terms of behavioral drivers constraining the use, so we found that women entrepreneurs lack the financial literacy necessary to understand the use of financial products available for them. And also, most of them actually agreed, 66% of rural men and women responded in agreement to that women entrepreneurs lack the financial literacy. Then there is a collective decision-making on loan use is correlated to marital status of women in women entrepreneurs. This was considered to be an internal driver. Nearly 30% indicated they were making decisions on their own. And most of the ones who were doing it on their own were actually the category of the single adult women, or the single young women were actually being controlled by their parents. And then the last behavioral driver is on the control, the decision on management of money. Decision on the management of money and through business activity is collective. So this, when it comes to decisions on the money that is already earned from the business activity, 65% of all the men and women were just about 54% from rural agreed on this, that they make decisions in consultation with their spouses, and 33% indicated independent decisions, and most of the decisions were influenced by either the parents or the husbands, depending whether you're married or single. So it's very important to understand these dynamics, especially when we're doing risk assessment for the financial service providers. It's very important to understand this kind of norm dynamics and how it impacts on the women. So in understanding the social norms, so we had to go deeper and actually identify from that conversation, what were the actual norms that are actually influencing the women from access, use, and controlling their income. And so how we classified them, you will see that throughout, that we had to get the personal belief. So to get the personal belief, you are looking at the individual preferences and what they think is deemed appropriate. And the second one, we looked at the empirical experiences. So the empirical is the people's beliefs. So these women's entrepreneurs' beliefs about what others do. So it's not basically about them, but now how do they what do they believe on what others are doing? And the normative is people's belief about what others think should be done. This is what actually controls the society. What does society now influence? And then we looked at the sanctions. We looked at the influencers first. The influencers are just the people to whom those behavior actually matter to and why. And also the sanctions is just the positive or negative reactions to those particular behavior. And so with that, we also looked at the exceptions. What are the exceptions? Are there situations where women can go against a particular norm? And so from the norms, we identified those norms from each change objective, so that it will be easier to know what are these norms under access, what are these norms under each other objective. So the first norm was women entrepreneurs should prioritize their family over their business. So this is because in African societies, women are the caregivers and we are the ones supposed to be at home. So they're supposed to prioritize their family over their businesses. And the second social norm was women entrepreneurs should rely on family for financial support instead of financial service providers, which the Honorable Deputy Governor had just echoed. And the third norm was women entrepreneurs should not have financial privacy from their spouse or male household member. We put the male household member because of some of the adult single women, probably they have older sons or they have male relatives that take over. And the fourth one was men should prioritize their finances. And from the norms, how we arrived at these norms, we identified the norms from the women entrepreneurs that were interviewed and represented these norms into social norm prioritization matrix. And then we, based on the strength and based on the prevalence. So we identified and classified them. After that, we exposed that to stakeholders, the same stakeholders I'd mentioned earlier, so that they identify further in terms of impact, feasibility, and also the sanctions. So those that had severity, we wanted to look at further, so that because those ones will have more weight. And so we look at each, but I'll not go into that narration. I want us to look at this social profile. So it's just for us to understand what the personal belief, the empirical, what others think, and what is society holds and the influences. And so for this particular norm one, that women should prioritize their family over business, the influencers are actually, for the married women is the husbands, their fathers-in-law or parents-in-laws, and the single women, it was just family members that put pressure on them that they should be prioritizing their families. And they agreed that because women are bound by duty to be within the home, so women entrepreneurs have internalized this particular norm, and so they think that should be prioritized over their own livelihood. And definitely, and as a normative, Rwandan society sees caregiving and household chores as a woman's responsibility. And so, but there are other exceptions. Sanctions, if you go against this, if you decide you are going to still do the business, based on the identity, such as the marital status and the level of education and the location, means rural or urban, it ranges from physical to verbal abuse to physical, leads to misunderstanding, others fear even divorce. And so exceptions only when you get permission from the husband or the influencers are you allowed to undertake this. So the second norm, women entrepreneurs should rely on family for financial support. And this, I'll go again to the profile. Most of them disagreed with this. And they believe that women should seek financial services from the FSPs, the financial service providers, in order to be financially disciplined. This is because they believe that the families do not even have that much amount of money that they require to actually as capital. And so the empirical, it's said that families do not have the adequate funds, lending is regularized. And also they also noted the prevalent, it's hard for women entrepreneurs to borrow from the FSPs. So that's the reason why they turn to families or friends. And of course, most people support the idea of women borrowing from the FSPs. Again, they echo the issue of collateral. The influencers, the negative ones were husbands and friends. And the sanctions are, of course, we know Igishegabo. You are told, you behave like a man. Yeah, so we've seen that even at the corporate, when you are vocal, women are supposed to be soft-spoken. I come from Kenya, and as we are told in the East Africa, they say the Kenyan women are not gentle. So we are called, I'm sure, Igishegabo. So exceptions when you have, when the women entrepreneurs receive consent from the husband, or you have sharing of ownership of the business, which means the woman entrepreneur is sharing business with the husband or the family member. And in few circumstances, you can use that collateral. So there is already shift in mindset when it comes to this because of the high cost of living. And so families are looking to actually have alternatives. So the third one, women entrepreneurs should not have financial privacy. This is very controversial. Apart from Nyagatare, all of them said that it is very uncommon for women entrepreneurs to keep financial privacy. But in Nyagatare, imagine 80% said they should have privacy. Maybe Madam Juliet, I don't know what you have done. But only in Nyagatare, and it is rural. The rest said that is very uncommon. The society also expects women to be financially transparent with their families. The influencers, of course, the parents, especially if they are from unmarried, and the spouses for the married ones, and just around the family. And the only exception is when the husband is irresponsible. That's when you are allowed to have some financial privacy. And sanctions are as much as leading to divorce, psychological. We had, I remember a lady in Burera had a young lady, one of the young, the age below the age 30, that had to separate from her family because she was seen as having this kind of some privacy. So some of them lead to divorce or separation. And the last one, men should manage finances. Of course, I remember when we were doing at the opener, the Slido survey, and even if you have even 1%, that 1% is a very big margin. We expect to see 100% being on the other side. So we still believe that men should manage the finances. So this majority actually disagreed, but they believe that shared responsibility over the management should be done, but they put a caveat that having shared responsibility does not imply equal responsibility. And so they still believe that even if you share, the man should have the final say over your money. For the empirical expectations, more families share they share the responsibilities. Men still have the sole control of the finances. And the normative increasing openness in the society for the shared responsibility of financial management, that is there. But there are still people who believe that men should have the sole control of the family's finances. The negative influencers here, majority were religious leaders and husbands, and of course, families and the neighbors. And also for the positive influencers are just good friends, workmates, local leaders and authorities, and also the women associations. The sanctions, the same. The sanctions are almost the same across each norm, and the exceptions are also almost the same across each norm. So segmentation of the profile of the women entrepreneurs and how they are impacted by the social norms. The single young women are expected to hand over their finances to their parents. And you find that the married women and the single young women were more, the sanctions are more severe to them. Unlike the married women, actually, most of the women who are saying on the positive side is because I think younger women, we are not yet, the family do not have trust in you to actually allow you to do business, especially be given the family family asset for collateral. But for married women, you've stayed there, you have been tried and tested, and so they are comfortable for that. But the single adults are the least affected by these adults. So it's very important for us to understand these categories and these demographics, so that even as we design our financial products, it's very important to understand what are these challenges, so that we don't just say, oh, collateral not for everyone, because they say the single adult women are likely to have their own collateral. And so in recommendation, we just say that the gender norms are collective drivers, and they influence behavior that constrain women's access, use, and benefit from financial services. And therefore, in addressing these constraints, it is important for all of us to invest in addressing the root causes to transform the negative norms that are resulting into conscious or unconscious bias that restrict women's financial inclusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you again to the team. This was super interesting. Did you find points in here that surprised you? Yes? No? Maybe so? Yeah, I think it was quite very interesting insights, and thank you again for sharing. I am aware that we are running a little bit behind as such things go when you're having fun, but we do have one of our panelists that may need to slip out, so we want to get right to the panelist section, if you would allow us to. Again, to absorb what has been shared, but also to hear from financial sector actors as well as to what's going on the ground. So if you would allow me, without further ado, to introduce our panel themed Breaking Gendered Social Norms, Restricting Women in Financial Inclusion. And first up, if I may call up Dr. Diane Karusisi, please give her a round of applause. Dr. Diane Karusisi is Chief Executive Officer of Bank of Kigali, the largest commercial bank in Rwanda in terms of assets. Since she joined in 2018, Diane has steered the bank through a digital transformation, as well as the expansion of the BK Group into new products, including general insurance, investment banking, and technology, to respond to the growing needs of the market and diversification of portfolio. Welcome, Dr. Karusisi. Thank you for being with us. Next up, I'd like to call forth Sophie Mills. And Sophie Mills leads the Financial Sector Deepening Network, the FSD network, collaborative gender program, which works with FSDs across Africa to mainstream gender into their operations and ensure that we're building inclusive financial systems in our countries. Prior to joining FSD Africa, Sophie worked in housing, microfinance, gender, and has over 15 years experience in Africa and the Middle East. Welcome, Sophie. Thank you for being with us. Next up is Nisha Singh, and my understanding is Madame Nisha is joining us virtually. So we are definitely doing the 21st century thing. We will have our virtual panelists. Let me allow, is she on Nelson? Yeah. All right. There you go. Hello. Hello, Nisha. How are you? Thank you for joining us. And Ms. Nisha Singh is the thematic lead for Gender Transformative Solutions for FinEquity, a global community of practitioners on women's financial inclusion convened by the CGAP. Ms. Nisha is experienced international economic development professional working at the intersection of financial inclusion and financial market systems development with a focus on women's economic empowerment and inclusion. Welcome, Ms. Nisha. Great. Last but not least, because we're talking about gender parity, we do have Mr. Fidel Rutaisire. Mr. Fidel, welcome, sir, welcome, from the Rwanda Men's Resource Center, also known as RAMREC. Fidel is founder and executive director of Rwanda Men's Resource Center, is a lawyer by education and a passionate and articulate women's rights activist in Rwanda. We love to see it, Mr. Fidel. Thank you very much. Please give him a big round of applause as well. Without further ado, we will get right into the conversation. And actually, the first question is directed to you, Dr. Karusisi, Diane, if I may. And it really speaks to having been, the head of BECA so many years. I'm sure you've seen the transformation and also the key issues and challenges on the ground. So maybe could you let us know what are the key challenges you've observed among women that prevent us, I should say, from accessing and using the financial services, considering that we're working so hard for gender parity? What are those obstacles that you're still seeing on the ground?
Thank you, and thank you very much for having me on the panel, and congratulations to AFR for launching this study. It's quite insightful. I think we've seen it. For us managers, probably traditional managers, when we lead companies, traditional managers, there's the managerial thinking that looks at shareholder first, that looks at quantitative information to generate knowledge and create knowledge. And that look at, I think most of you guys who've been to school in the 90s and the 2000s, every problem is mainly an optimization under constraints. But when I look at where I think the world is going, and they're going towards design thinking as opposed to managerial thinking, we want to put the user first. And I think that has been the main mistake of banks. As very traditional businesses, you look at shareholders, you don't really look at the user. And I think what AFR is telling us is that we need to go towards design thinking and look at behaviors as opposed to numbers, statistics, look at constraints, and be creative around constraints. So we know there are constraints, we know there are these social norms. How can we be creative and provide and design products that are still appealing to the women despite the constraints, and not take these constraints as given? So, and I think the onus is really on traditional financial institutions to consider design thinking as opposed to traditional managerial thinking, and really design financial products that address the needs of the women and understand and consider all the constraints of the women. So I've seen all these things, and on the table we're discussing them with Mama Odette, who has a wealth of experience and expertise on these social norms. And we all need to be creative. And I was thinking when Emily was presenting, I was thinking maybe as opposed to designing products that are addressing only looking at one woman entrepreneur, how about we create communities of women entrepreneurs, because that are sponsored either by the church or by the government, for the community not to see this as a force of bad. It has to really be seen as a force of good, and it has to be supported and promoted by the communities. So we really need to be able to look at these constraints and become creative on how we design our products. And this is now what many of us are doing. It's not only Bank of Kigali, most financial institutions actually are taking a new approach to design thinking. And that's why we are all hiring user experience designers, user interface designers. These are people that you would not meet in a bank a few years ago, but we now have these people. And we are really looking at the problems, and we want to solve problems as opposed to just thinking, what is going to be our bottom line at the end of the year. I think that the regulator is there when we design products, and I have my compliance team with me, they always look at the constraints, what is allowed by the regulation. And we always need to tell them, the regulation, of course, is a given. How do we create still products that address the issues of the women? And we've started to do that. And with the support of AFR, some few years ago, we designed a product called the Zamuka Mugore, allowing women to take small loans, mainly traders, cross-border traders, without collateral, without the needs for the husband or the partner to sign. And it was quite successful. So we now really need to go towards design thinking, look at these social norms, and thanks to AFR for creating this knowledge. So we can then use this knowledge and these insights to design products that will address the problems of women entrepreneurs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's really fascinating. And if I may stay with you as well, because I know unfortunately you have to leave us soon, and I want to get as much out of this, but it's actually, you're talking about a different way of thinking and approaching product development for financial sector. And I think that's very unique at this point. You're no longer looking at the shareholders, you're looking at the users of those products and seeing how you could be inclusive. And so I think in what you mentioned, the creativity may be the answer, but what untapped opportunities do you see in switching that mind frame and maybe changing the approach to how we create financial products?
So I think the untapped opportunities are immense. When we look at access to banking services, below 40% of adults, yet most people, I think above 75, 80% have mobile money. We see there, I think, an opportunity that is left to fintech, telco, because they have this design thinking approach. So that's why we are looking now, maybe not necessarily to compete, but collaborate with this fintech and these people who think differently, to design more products beyond payments and remittance products, more products, loans, insurance, micro investments that will attract the masses. And by the way, this is how you make money. The more users you have, the more money we make. And technology has made the transaction costs very low. For you to add one more customer, you don't need to invest in a branch or in fixed infrastructure, because we have now the technology, we have internet, etc. So I really feel now that it's easy to access people through technology. We just need to get the right products, and we are able to expand significantly our businesses. So I'll give you an example. We launched with MTN, but also a fintech called Intelligra, a product called Makie. Probably many people have heard about this product. It's a smartphone financing product that allows people to own a smartphone and actually have access to a connected life and pay as little as 200 francs a day. And I like very much the PR around the product. Instead of buying a banana every day, you can actually own a smartphone. So in designing the products, and we made the mistake that most people made, we didn't think of gender norms. We just thought, okay, there's a big smartphone gap. We have only about 20% of people in Rwanda owning a smartphone, and this is a big barrier to getting people connected. So we said, let's have this product, and people can afford to pay 200, 300 a day or 1,000 a week to own a smartphone. Today, I think fast forward 2-3 months ago, when we started the product, it's a boom. We have, I think every week, we disburse over 1,000 loans, which is quite significant. And we have now more than 4,000 loans that are given.
Every week you disperse about 1,000 loans.
So this is a new bank. When you think about it, the scale is, so of course these loans are small, but it's mind-blowing to many of us. But I was asking my colleagues, I want to understand the details, and I want to know, the gender gaps. And I was shocked to hear that 80% of these smartphones are given to men. And I told my people, let's go back to the drawing board. We don't want to give access to internet to men. I mean, we don't want to create a new digital gap. So now we are going back to the drawing board. How do we make sure, we attract women because they can afford these phones? How do we make sure we can get these women getting a smartphone? What are the right messages? How can we tweak maybe the communication to make sure women also access phones? And I just realized for some traditional businesses, we all fall in the same trap. Just going with assumptions, constraints, and not really looking at the user. So again, this is a lesson, and I keep telling my colleagues, next time when we design a product, please.
You'll call Emily and get the newest report from the year.
I'll call you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a fantastic, I should say, case study, because I'm sure many of us would have fallen headfirst into the same trap. And I think the message that we're hearing over and over again is there are nuances to inclusivity. Just because you make smartphones affordable does not mean that women or groups, disadvantaged groups, are also taking advantage. And those, I think, fall now into those social norms that we're going into. So thank you so much for that. And you also oversaw the digital transformation of Beka. And I think at the time we were all like, what is Momo? And now it's something nobody even thinks about. So we hope that this continues, and it continues within financial inclusion, whereby women no longer feel, that loans are something or collateral is something they can no longer afford. So thank you very much for that insight, especially as a commercial bank. So walking the fine line between being a commercial entity and doing social good. And with that said, if I can turn maybe to Ms. Sophie Mills, who I think your mandate or the mandate of FSD is quite specific to deepening financial sector development and inclusion. So we'd love to hear from you a bit more about how market facilitators and FSD programs have considered these issues and what learnings could be drawn from your work.
Yeah, sure. FSDs work in a slightly different way. Obviously, they are outside the market, facilitating the market. So their approach is really to catalyze or to incentivize change in actors in order to get inclusive finance outcomes. And for the network, because there are 10 financial sector deepening country programs, we've really mainstreamed gender into that work. So we're very interested in women's financial inclusion specifically. And part of that work entails identifying constraints. Why is the system not working properly? Why are women not taking up a loan to access a smartphone? And what's so incredibly useful about gender norms and understanding how they work is that a lot of the times when we look at what we think are just economic constraints to women's ability to access financial services. So we see things like we can't serve women because they don't have collateral, or we can't serve women because on average their incomes are lower and they can't afford our product, or we don't have the data about women, so we can't price for that risk. What's actually happening is that those are more reflections of gender bias in our society about what we consider appropriate or inappropriate things for women to do. So we can't give women credit because they don't have collateral. We ask the question why a couple of times, and the why is not often regulatory, because women can own land, for example, but they are impeded from accessing that land because there are very specific norms about women's ability to do so. It's considered inappropriate, therefore they won't ask for it, or they may not even be aware of it. So what I think has been a learning for the FSDs is that a lot of the constraints are actually, structurally to do with gender norms. So that's part of what we are working to do with the FSDs, and the FSDs with their markets we're really sort of trying to deepen our internal understanding of that. So we've got 2 FSDs that are currently doing work specifically on gender norms. So Access to Finance Rwanda, as well as a sister organization, FSD Zambia. So they are part of a CGAP-led collaborative process to understand. That's where this report came from, a diagnostic to really understand how do you identify social norms? What are they? How they work? And so those 2 FSDs are now working on designing interventions, which we hope will be norm aware, norm intentional, and hopefully norm transformational as well. And the learnings from that are getting shared out. So today's event is a great example of how we're planning to do that. But I also just wanted to talk a little bit about learnings, I would say, internal to the FSDs as we've gone through this process, which I hope will be of interest to this audience. So the first sort of learning or observation is that when you have discussions about gender norms and you intend those discussions to be about your clients or about your partners, just expect there to be a lot of pushback in your own workplace. When we talk about these things, we raise gender norms and we uncover gender bias in our own workplaces, and that those conversations can sometimes be very difficult. The other point, and sort of coming out of the conversations that we've had with FSD staff, is that norms are changing all the time, whether they're changing fast, whether they're changing slowly, whether we're part of that or whether we're not. That change is happening. And I don't think that we should think that we are, tampering with culture or treading on something which isn't appropriate for us to be involved in by considering norms. Because my next point is we're not going to break norms. I mean, I'd love to think we were that efficient in our work, but we're not going to do that in a hurry. I think we need to be very moderate in our ambitions. At the best, we will nudge the work that, for example, the products that you were talking about, you'll work to make sure more women access that. That's not going to revolutionize anything, but it's going to be a nudge, and it's going to be part of a bigger shift that will be happening, whether we're involved or not. I think norms work can have detrimental impacts on men and women that we need to be very careful about. I think it's probably quite obvious where the detrimental impacts for women lie, but norms are enforced by women and men are as subject to norms as women are. So I think it's very important for us to be aware about that. And I guess that's my final point, is that this is not just a conversation about women. This is a conversation about men and women and the way they interact. And we cannot just focus on understanding what is happening in the women customer journey. We have to understand what's happening for men as well. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Sophie. That was also very insightful, and jotted a couple of points down. Norms are always changing, and I'm going to come back to you on that, Mr. Rutayisire. But before I get to you, I'd like to turn to is Nisha on?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Nisha.
Hi.
Thank you. I wish. Where are you calling us from, if I may ask?
I'm calling from Washington, D.C. So good morning from here.
Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us all the way across the pond, as some people say. Pleasure to have you, and thank you for joining us. And we'd love to hear a little bit from you, having worked, working with FinEquity, which is a global practice, global community, and to really hear about maybe how gender norms affecting women's financial inclusion in other developing markets. If you could give us maybe some insights.
Sure. First, thank you so much for inviting me to join this panel. Thanks to AFR for organizing this event. I'll just do a very quick intro. My name is Nisha, and I'm based in Washington, D.C. I was in Rwanda earlier this year, and I wish I could have been there in person today. So as Sophie mentioned very briefly in her remarks, we've been facilitating a collaborative effort with different, donors and market facilitators across 6 different countries to do a similar sort of diagnostic that was done in Rwanda to really understand, what is driving women's financial behavior in terms of how they interact with financial services, what they use, what they don't use. So we did this in Bangladesh, in India, in Tunisia, in Zambia, in Malawi, and then a 7th got added on in Uganda a little bit later, following this very similar approach of, really identifying for a particular group of women, whether it's young women or women entrepreneurs or, women who are in agriculture. What is it? How do they behave when it comes to using financial services? And then what is it that's driving them? And not surprisingly, a lot of the findings are similar across different markets. So, you heard Emily talk a lot about the fact that, women entrepreneurs are expected to not have financial privacy except in, specific regions. So that was a common norm that played out in across almost every market this research has been done in. The difference is that there are always situations in which it's okay for women to have that level of financial privacy. And it might have to do with demographic factors such as age and education and location, or it might have to do with what kind of enterprise that they are engaged in. And then, the other layer when we talk about privacy that comes in often is that, digital financial services was thought to provide women more privacy, but there are norms around access to digital technologies. As Diana was just saying, women often don't have phones, and that is because there are collective expectations. As research was done in Uganda recently, which found that one of the norms that was prevalent in those communities in Uganda was that a man should always have full access to his wife's phone. The reverse was not applicable. So, that does mean that even if you are able to provide her a phone and digital financial services, she may not have full control. And these are household negotiations. So what the diagnostic is really trying to understand is, where are there opportunities? Where are we seeing exceptions to the rule? Where are norms relaxing? And how can some of those opportunities be leveraged to, as was mentioned, nudge change? Because norms are deeply entrenched often. We talked about a little bit about the sanctions. So, if a woman tries to have financial privacy, it might create discord in terms of, a harmony in the marriage. It might create tension with her in-laws. She might be called names. So you want to change those collective expectations about what she can and cannot do in terms of her access to financial services, but also do it in a way where you're not creating, backlash. You're not contributing to things like gender-based violence. So it's really important to be able to have this in-depth understanding and then use those insights to, as was being discussed, kind of really inform how you design your products, how you approach women as customers, how are they getting information, what kind of, policies are being played at. And there is, of course, a role for, working with those influencers to change their mindset, because norms don't affect just women, as was just said, they affect men. Men are expected to take care of finances. And by, focusing on women's financial inclusion and changing some of these responsibilities, creating more equitable opportunities, you can actually contribute to, easing the burden for men as well. So, the norms don't change from country to country significantly. I think it's the sanctions and how they play out for a particular segment of women that often changes. And it's really useful to have that understanding when you're trying to think about, okay, who is this woman customer, and what does she need, and what are the constraints that she specifically faces that we either have to work around or think about, supporting a pathway out, so that she can realize her full potential.
Thank you very much, Nisha. That's I love the connection. Actually, you are responding and reaffirming Sophie's point that this is about nudging. This is about really kind of going in slowly and maybe influencing behavior change rather than breaking it, because there's so many other, I should say, ties, right? There's so many other things that can be affected if this is not done right. And another point that you raised as well is that different norms, there are different norms depending on different factors, social factors, age factors, something that Emily also raised. So we cannot just look at women as a monolith, but even within that, what exactly, what are these different, I should say, influences, behaviors, and opportunities that are there. Thank you very much for that contribution, Nisha. And I'm sure we'll get back to this, because now I turn to you, Fidel, which I set you up for a question earlier. Really, which is to say, you represent, actually, this makes me so happy to see this group here in Rwanda. And because what you're doing is what I think a lot of our advocates are saying and financial experts are saying is that it needs both hands. The inclusion needs to not just be about women, but about men, and helping to change, or I should say, nudge gender norms together. So turning to you, maybe from your experience, from the work you have done as well with Rwanda Men's Resource Center, what initiatives could you share with us that you have done to address some of these behavioral norms? And if you saw any norms in this study that your group has already kind of countered and maybe working on, but maybe you could speak a little bit more to the work that you do.
Thank you very much. For those who are not familiar with RWAMREC is a feminist men's network that is promoting positive masculinity, engaging men for gender equality and violence prevention. So we have been transforming masculinity norms for quite a long time. And from civil society point of view, let me tell you that it is possible to transform these gender norms. However, it takes time and it is expensive. Yes. So let me give you some examples of how we have been transforming these social norms. I will give some few of our examples. Like one is the GWEP, Gender Equality and Women Empowerment Program, which is a gender transformative program, which actually promotes gender equality and women's empowerment through the active involvement of men. So GWEP uses integrated models like what we call a journey of transformation. Journey of transformation is a series of gender transformative sessions whereby we help husbands of women who are part of voluntary saving loans associations. So we help them going through a journey of transformation of about 17 to 22 sessions. And these men actually go through a journey of changing attitudes, changing their behaviors, and they are involved in many activities which are contributing to having their wives benefiting, but also participating in economic activities. So GWEP actually also uses men engaged clubs to mobilize other men to change their attitudes, their behaviors in relation to women's economic activities. So some of the results are that these men who have changed their attitude, behaviors, are becoming positive supporters to their wives, to their women who are part of the women's economic activities. So another example is what we call Bandebereho, which stands for role model. This is a fatherhood and couples program, which also is designed to actually transform or to challenge gender norms, especially masculinity norms, but also transforming norms around male engagement into maternal health, child health, newborn health, but also violence prevention and unpaid care work. So for your information, this program also works on couples relationship, but also communications, and it goes deep. It talks about how a couple should, for instance, discuss about finance, how a couple should make its budget, how a couple should share decisions. Yes, and we did a randomized control trial of this program. And interestingly, this program has been able to reduce intimate partner violence at 45%. And the decision-making has really shifted because men who have been part of this program are no longer controlling the finances of their families.
Wow, Fidel, how did you manage that?
Yes, so it works.
Fantastic.
Yes, now another example is what we call Indashikirwa, which stands for Agent of Change. Now this works on transforming attitudes of the couples, especially in relation to gender power relations. So they also go through a gender transformative journey of 22 sessions, and they tackle many issues like how do we share roles and responsibilities in the homes? How do we share decisions? How do we work together? And this has also been able to increase women's participation in economic activities, because the men who are alongside their wives are being very supportive. Yes, so another program is called the 3R. 3R stands for recognizing, reducing, and redistributing unpaid care work. So as you know, women are actually, they have a burden, and men who are sometimes in bars drinking. So when their wives are in microfinance associations, when they bring money at home, these men take over the money. But now we teach, we transform these men's attitudes and practices and behaviors to kind of get involved in unpaid care work, household activities, so that when these women are busy in their cooperatives, then these men should also be busy at home doing household activities.
That's amazing, Fidel. That is
Yeah,
actually revolutionary.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So briefly,
Yeah.
it works. And lastly, we have another program called Tuchecheka, Let Us Speak Out. It's a program which is engaging fathers of teen mothers to kind of support their daughters in economic activities. And this is also increasing the self-confidence and self-esteem of these teen mothers to be actively involved in economic activities. Thank you.
Fidel, thank you very much. And actually, before I want to come back to you, but if you would, we would like to excuse Dr. Karusisi, who has been kind enough to give us her time, even past time. So thank you so much. Please, big round of applause. Thank you very much, Diane. And actually, Fidel, you know,
this is extremely important work. I don't want to overplay it, but as we said, we still live in quite a traditional society. To help to change mindsets, to think about unpaid work, supporting teenage mothers, but thinking about also how we do the gender parity within a relationship, extremely important on the ground. And I just wanted to really recognize that and the work that your group is doing and your team is doing. And I think it's also a great call out to say that really, as we talk we can talk a lot about women, but if the men are not bought in, we don't have buy-in from the spouses, from our fathers, from our brothers, it becomes really a lost cause. So Fidel, thank you very much for being here to share with us. And maybe if I can turn actually back to you, Sophie, just to round up the conversation is, yeah, oh, do you have the mic? Okay, great. You know, given the existing challenges we've seen facing women, and here we're really talking from a macro level, because I'm going to come back to you, Fidel, from more of a micro level, but from a macro level, really, what should be the next priorities of FSDs in addressing gendered social norms to ensure inclusive growth and sustainable livelihoods?
Yeah. Sorry about that. So I think the first thing is what we're busy doing at the moment, which is getting it on the agenda. FSDs have quite a unique position within the financial sector because their role is to seek out solutions, facilitate those solutions. So ensuring that FSDs are aware of the importance of gender norms in the work that they're doing is kind of, and putting it on the agenda and getting it out into the marketplace so that the sector as a whole understands the importance of that, I think, is the first thing. The second I would say is information. Again, this is something which traditionally FSDs do. They facilitate the flow of information between market actors. So understanding, you know, supporting the market to really understand, what do we mean when we talk about social norms? How do we define that? What does that work look like? Which ones should we be considering? I think thirdly, they also have a role to play in identifying market actors or partners who haven't traditionally, like you, who haven't traditionally been part of what we consider to be the financial sector. You know, traditionally we've thought it's sort of the banks, and now we're talking about fintechs and we're talking about MNOs. But we really need to widen the scope, because the more we explore this topic, the more it becomes clear that we're not going to find the answers if we just keep a very closed loop of stakeholders. And then I think also demonstrating, which again is just a classic FSD tool, working with partners to unpack how we might address norms, how to design interventions that are norm intentional or norm transformational, demonstrating to the market, you know, how this can be done. And I think that's really part of the bigger piece of work that FSDs are doing around demonstrating the business case for women's financial inclusion. We talk a lot, when we talk about that, we talk about data, yes. But this is an equally vital part of that demonstration. And then the convening, you know, bringing together people who wouldn't necessarily meet otherwise, providing that information, facilitating those relationships. I would say that, you know, all of these things are what we are trying to get FSDs doing, and they're increasingly doing. So yeah, I think there's a lot around sort of shifting from a supply side perspective and thinking that if we just design the right product, we'll have the solution, and actually looking at, no, what is it that our potential clients need? What are the circumstances of their life? You know, and there are tools we can use like human-centered design, appropriate segmentation. Not all women are the same. Yeah, so just really sort of pushing the boundaries on how we think about this.
Thank you. That's really in line with, I think, as you mentioned, Diane's view on how commercial entities are thinking, or some are thinking differently, thinking holistically and beyond the normal, I should say, players of the financial sector. And I think you mentioned this on the first question, really also internally, right? Doing a reflection internally and ensuring.
Absolutely. It's not an easy conversation to have. It's not a lot of the pushback comes from people thinking, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if we see this in FSPs or that those are reflections from sort of members of the financial sector here that, well, this isn't our business. This isn't what we should be doing. This is getting way out of what we think is our appropriate level of intervention. But it's really, challenging that. And I think a big part of what comes out of that actually aligns with work that some FSPs are doing to challenge the thinking about gender within their own organization. Part of the discussions that they're having about equality and diversity and inclusion in their organization, these two paths go together, I think.
That's really sparks some ideas that I would even throw out to the audience. Like today's poll, I wonder if everyone went back to their respective organizations and did a poll like this, what would you find? And would it be a surprise? I know I was surprised today, and I'm sure we would be surprised. But there are a lot of internal biases that we may carry, or even ideas of what we think inclusivity is about. I know some people who think this is purely a social policy, has nothing to do with money or commerce, and yet what we're learning, and what I think also Nisha mentioned here, and what we're hearing from panelists, is that it should be a win-win. Right? If the wife does well, the household does well. If there are two earners, everyone wins. So it should not be antagonizing. But again, I'm throwing it out to you. What would happen if you did a poll in your own internal organizations, even before we went out there? So something to keep in mind. And Nisha, turning back to you as well, in terms of markets, maybe markets outside those, that already have FSD programmings, but what are insights that you've seen other markets doing to address gender norms? You've mentioned India, Bangladesh, Algeria. I don't know. Could you give us some insights that are working there?
Yeah, I think, the bringing together of gender norms, specifically in financial inclusion is still relatively new because, as Diana was saying, financial sector actors have always thought, oh, our products are gender neutral, or, it's for everyone who can access it. So this thinking is a little bit new. There are efforts in, there's a bank in Kenya that has done work, working with women's oil banking to reform their entire lending process to move to a cash flow based lending. So there's no need for collateral. It's looking at the entrepreneur and their business and assessing the credit needs and worthiness of the entrepreneur based on what they're already doing. So, if collateral is a big challenge, how do you get around that issue? By reforming the product and the process that the institution adopts. So this goes back to the gender intentional or gender intelligent design. Also looking at, that also required retraining all their credit officers, how they interact with women entrepreneurs, what kind of questions do you ask? So it's an intensive process, but it leads to change. And the bank saw business profitability as a result of it. So it was worth the effort. And we're also seeing several examples of where banks are recognizing that what you need in addition to a financial product is some sort of non-financial service that is really designed for women entrepreneurs to understand where they are in their journey and what would it take for them to grow. So, combining these two, and again, there's growing and ample evidence, put together by the IFC to show that it's actually profitable to invest in those non-financial services because it increases the credit worthiness of your client. They're more likely to use other products. You're cross-selling to them. So you're ultimately investing in a really good customer. So those are some examples. And then there's a couple of other really interesting examples around, kind of working on using social media or mass media approaches to influence behavior change at the community level, show women entrepreneurs as role models in TV shows, and what that looks like when couples make joint financial decisions and how that benefits the entire family. All of us watch soap operas and so many shows, and we're constantly getting influenced by those. So if we can do a bit of positive role modeling through those channels that are already out there and have a massive outreach, I think we can create some change that is at scale. And there is, again, good examples of this being tried out in Kenya, in Pakistan, in India. So there's a lot of lessons to draw from that.
Thank you. So a mixture of, I think, I would say leadership, the political will and leadership to affect change from the highest levels and allow for this kind of formation. You've mentioned there needs to be representation, more demonstration, to Sophie's point, of success, and that it demonstrates a win-win proposition, and being able to showcase that this is actually good for everyone. Very, very interesting. And I wonder how many of these we can adopt or have already adopted in Rwanda. I know we have a high representation of women. I think the financial sector here has really led that as well. If you look at some of our top financial heads in Rwanda, these are women. I think most of the banks are led by women. And I can imagine what this can do for a young person coming up, a young lady coming up, thinking about what she can do in the future. And this is something she can see. She can see a deputy governor that's a woman. She can see a CEO that's a woman. That's really fantastic. But it needs the leadership, I'm assuming, at the top, and then the community to support it. And I think this is where, Fidel, you come in also in terms of the role and the work you've done in the community with men. What would you say are some, roles that men can play in relaxing or working around these social norms? You've talked about the different initiatives that that the resource center has undertaken, but I'm assuming, what else do you imagine could be done, especially at the national level? As we said, something so interesting here. It's not that women don't have the economic power. You'll find a lot of women may have land or be signed as a co-signer to land, but they cannot access it as collateral, for example. So knowing our Rwandan ways, knowing Rwandan culture, knowing also where we're going, but we also have some traditional aspects of ourselves that we've kept. What do you see? What do you think men could do to
Well, thank you very much. I think the first thing men should ensure is accountability. So men should be accountable for their actions at all levels. So at national level, at policy level, at institutional level, at community level, but also at individual level. So we should be accountable for our actions.
What does that look like, if I may ask?
In other words, we should, men are still the gatekeepers of gender roles, gender orders, and men still have power. And unfortunately, they are using their power in bad ways. So men are part of the problems, but they should also be part of the solution. So now by accountability, I mean that men should be accountable to their actions in their everyday lives. So now, secondly, men should be, especially these champions, they should be agent of change to help other men to change. Yes. Thirdly, men should go down in the community and help those men at community level, because one of our lessons learned is that all these initiatives, to be successful, they have to be community-based. They have to be contextual adapted, and they have to be facilitated by community members. So we need to engage these men at community level, but also making sure that there is a policy which is backing them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fidel. That's very, very important. I think what you also pointed out at the very end is that it has a policy that can back them and support this community level. And for sure, it's the father that teaches the son, as it's the mother that teaches the daughter. So what we will create change by role modeling for those younger generations. And I think that's why some of your initiatives are so important, whether it's father to teenage daughter or brother to brother or what have you, as in complement to the empowerment that women are receiving on the ground as well. So I think really this comes to the end of our panel. I could ask so many more questions, but we're running out of time. But thank you so much for providing us an insight into policy, into macroeconomics, into community work, but really giving us an insight as to all the pieces that need to come together for something to work. And it starts with information. And that's why I think this report is so important, but also working together across the board. So with that said, please, if you would please join me in giving a big round of applause to our panelists, Sophie Mills, Mr. Fidel Rutaisire, and Nisha Singh all the way from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much to everyone. And so with that, we come, unfortunately, like they say, all good things must come to an end. And happy to have us end on a note with a very, very influential person who has done a lot of work here as well in Rwanda. I've heard a lot of people call her Mama Rose. I'm a little shy to call you Mama Rose, but please give a big round of applause for closing remarks for Madame Rose Rabugihi from the Gender Monitoring Office. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Thank you, Olivia. Dear participants, allow me first to convey my thanks to Access to Finance Rwanda for organizing this important discussion. It is timely, it is needed, and I think it is very useful. So congratulations for the study. I hope we will receive it all, and it is going for sure to make some differences. And I think Rwamrek is going to have a lot from this to work. I also want to commend the different speakers and the panelists. They shared a very important and a very interesting insight and testimonies. The good thing that it is not only the words, they also provided very, very insightful or practical ways to go. Unfortunately, Diana and the governor are not here, but I really want to convey my appreciation and wish that the good example they have displayed here can be also captured and shared so that we can use them and the other partners also can use them. Abaturutse i Bugesera na Rwamagana ndagira ngo nabo mbashimire cyane. The testimonies mwatanze ni nziza cyane kandi turabashimira ko mudacika intege. This is very important. You know, it is so difficult to work in that kind of environment. I have been very, very struck by the tenacity, the courage, and the success they had in so difficult way. It is difficult to do business when you are not backed by the community, because those are your clients. When you are not backed by your partner at home, this is the person you work with, who has to support you. And it has been difficult for them to go and really make business in those kind of hardship. Ariko turabashimira cyane ko mwerekana yuko bishoboka. Ni testimonies, example nk'izi ngizi muba mwatanze zerekana yuko bishoboka, bigatuma n'abandi batinyuka. It gives others really the courage to do it. I really want to commend what you have done and what they have done. It is obvious, and it has been shown in the study, that social norms are a big challenge. I'm not going to come back because the panelists and speakers talked enough about those challenges, but I want to just share and contribute and provide some suggestions that can help maybe advance the agenda of gender inclusion. One is early education. I think the problem we have, we talk about financial inclusion very late. We should be speaking about financial inclusion at an early stage. We should have boys and girls in the community, in the family, in education, the formal education, the informal education. We should be talking about it because it is critical, it is imperative. But we talk about it very late. And it is debated only in spaces like this, where we have specialists. We have to bring it close to the community. We have to bring it to the citizen. It should not be something that is special, is for expert. It has to be something that we live with because really we need it every single day. And I think the formal education, the informal education, the discussion in our different communities gathering, access to finance, and the gender responsiveness of access to finance should be closer to the community. We have the SACCOs, we have now banks. The Bank of Kigali is expanding, and many other banks going much more closer to the community. But I don't think really gender issues are debated. We have to bring them much more closer to the community. Second, I think it is time that we inform the population about the gender norms. Sometimes people do live things, but they don't know that it is really an issue for them, for the community, and for the country. I think Rwanda knows much more than me that when you approach people and you give them information in a common language, in a simple way, they change. They change, they can change. We can continue doing studies. We can still debate here in Marriott and everywhere. But if you don't close to the community and package it in a language that can be understandable by most of the people, including those who are hostile to gender issues, I think there is a way of really coming to a transformation that we want. A third point I want really to bring the discussion is the attitude, not of the people in the community, but of the service providers. Although we have more women now leading banks, and this is something that we have to appreciate in Rwanda, but still, I don't believe that the banks they lead are gender responsive in the processes, in the way they provide services to men and women. This accountability is needed. We have to increase accountability, and I think we can, in GMO, partner with Access to Finance Rwanda and other partners so that we can ensure that the financial services are much more gender responsive and can respond to the challenges we are seeing here. Because if I have discrimination in my family, I have discrimination in the community, and when I go through this hardship and go still to the bank, to the SACCO, and I still meet challenges there, you see, I'm discouraged. I believe that these women who testified, they can get much more returns, they can go much higher, they can do more business if they were backed by a community, by a family, and by service providers who are providing really good services and empowering women. This is something we are calling upon the different partners who are here to ensure that service providers are held accountable to be much more responsive. This is the government requirement, and this should be something that we do on a much more large scale. I will not end my address without talking to the momentum created by ICT. Transaction through mobile phones, through other ways. This is a momentum we have to seize to ensure that really men and women, and more importantly, women who are in rural areas, who are not close to the banks, who are not close to the services, can access financial services. We have seen in the last gender profile we did in on access to finance that the access to mobile services have increased tremendously the way women are now dealing with resources, financial resources. This is something we have to really be mindful of. Take this opportunity and ensure that we expand it and we make it user-friendly for women. So we need that ICT is friendly to women and girls. We need that is much more gender responsive, because what we have seen and what we have been told, devices are expensive, internet is not easy to get, but also there is ICT literacy that is not enough expanded in the community. All this can be supported by all of us, and we can increase the momentum of reaching access to finance that is much more gender responsive. Just want to finish by congratulating Access to Finance Rwanda and calling upon all of us to ensure that we have heard what the study is doing. What we need to know is to say, what is going to be my action? What is going to be my contribution to ensure that what we heard today are not going to hit tomorrow and after tomorrow. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I want to let it pause. I want to let this sink in. Thank you very, very much, Mama Rose. That's a call to action that we should not fail to take forward with us. And so, with that said, I'd like to bring this session to a close. Thank you again very much, and for sticking with us even past time. And thank you to our panelists and AFR Rwanda. Well done. Congratulations. We look forward to the next lead. I believe there's a networking session after this. Really? Sorry. Well, the session has come to a close. Please feel free to network, exchange numbers, meet our panelists. And thank you again. Please keep an eye out for the next lead series. And we look forward to hearing maybe some of the takeaways that you have implemented yourselves. Thank you again. Have a lovely evening. Bye-bye.
There's a coffee break outside. Huh? I don't want you to say bye. Bye. I
started talking and then I was like, here, there, everywhere. I'll be happy to.
So, do you still have the same number? Like, there is a coffee break and tidbits outside for anyone who wants to get something to eat.